Running a macro in Excel is easy, but what if you want to run it repeatedly or at a specific time without clicking any buttons or pressing any keyboard shortcuts? That's where scheduling comes in. In this video, I'll explain to you how to run your macros whenever you want. I'll show you how to set this up using Excel VBA, then reveal a secret method that offers more visibility of your scheduled tasks. Okay, let's use Excel VBA Scheduler macro. First, we need to make sure we have a macro that does what we want. In this case, I created a macro that writes a timestamp into the worksheet. It adds a line on the log worksheet every time it's run. So the first line is just an error handler. If there is an error, it will jump all the way down and exit the sub after displaying a message box. The next line is define the target range to show the timestamps. After we've defined that, we can set target range, the first empty row in column A, which is this one here. Then we update the date updated column with the current date here. And then we update the time updated column with the current time here. Next, we update the comment column with a success comment here. Finally, we just do a bit of tidy up to center align the date and time columns and auto-fit the comment column with an extra 10% for a bit of space. And finally, we save the workbook and exit the sub. You can download the workbook with this macro in the download section. Now we'll look at how to use the Application.OnTime method to run a macro at a specified time in the future. We have this subroutine called Start Scheduler. There's 2 lines. The first is to set the next runtime as 2 seconds from now. And the second is to call this method Application.OnTime. Now we've got 2 parameters specified here. The first is earliest time. We set the earliest time to be 2 seconds from now. The second parameter is procedure, and we've set that to be record timestamp schedule. And that is this procedure down here, which is identical to the one we saw before, except that it has 2 lines, and I'll show you them now. Scroll down. I've added 2 lines here. After save file, everything up here is the same as before. This part is new. So after it's done all this, save the workbook. It's going to set the next runtime as 2 seconds from now. It's going to call this method Application.OnTime, schedule time, record timestamp schedule. And what that does is it tells Excel to schedule this macro, which is the one we're currently in, record timestamp schedule, to run in 2 seconds from now. So basically what that does is as soon as I run this macro, it's going to do everything in here, save the workbook, and then schedule for 2 seconds. And after 2 seconds, it will run again from the beginning, and it will just go in this infinite loop every 2 seconds. Beginning, wait 2 seconds, and so on. So that's fine if we want to schedule a macro to run every 2 seconds. It could be 10 seconds, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 10 hours. But what if we want to stop scheduling? How do we do that? Well, we'll come back to Start Scheduler. So that macro was to start the scheduler going. We've got another one called Stop Scheduler. And there's only one line here which stops the macro from running. So when you want to cancel a task, you must give the exact name of the macro, which is this one here, and the exact time when you schedule the task to run, which is in this variable here. If you use a different time, so these don't match, then the Application.OnTime method will report an error and then send Excel into break mode which forces you to debug the error. So you've got to make sure that these times are the same and the procedure is the same. Now, the new part is at the end of Application.OnTime, you set the schedule to be false, and that cancels the task. So I'll go through this again. Start running the scheduler. You'll see on the left, it says the macro is successfully executed, and it runs every 2 seconds. And it will keep running every 2 seconds until I run this macro, stop scheduler. Watch what happens when I run this on. Now Excel no longer executes the macro every 2 seconds. Awesome. You've just learned how to use the Application.OnTime method to run a macro on a specific schedule. You've also learned how to cancel a scheduled macro by setting the schedule parameter to false. But let's ask some questions about this method. For example, how can you see what tasks are scheduled and when they'll run? Or how can you schedule a task for a specific time without doing any calculations? Unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of using the Application.OnTime method is that Excel doesn't provide us with a nice overview of what tasks are scheduled or when they'll run. We have to keep track of them ourselves or use some code to display them in a message box or a worksheet. What's the solution? Well, there's a hidden gem in Windows that can help us schedule our Excel macros more easily and reliably. It's called Windows Task Scheduler, and it's a powerful tool that can run programs or scripts at a time or interval you want. So how do we use Windows Task Scheduler to run our Excel macros? The basic idea is that we create a Visual Basic script that opens Excel if it's not already open and runs our macro. Then we create a task in the task scheduler that runs the script at the desired time or interval, and the script runs the Excel macro. Now, a Visual Basic script is similar to VBA code, but it runs outside of Excel. There's a file extension of .vbs, and you can write it in any text editor, such as Notepad. Let's look at how this works in practice. Are you ready to see some magic? We're going to use a Visual Basic script that will run our Excel macro automatically, even if Excel isn't open. So a Visual Basic script is a simple way to write code that can run in Windows. It is a file extension of .vbs, and you can write and edit a VBS file in any text editor because it's just a file with text. However, I recommend using Visual Studio Code. This is Microsoft's free and powerful source code editor. It's got many features that make it useful. For example, IntelliSense, which goes beyond syntax highlighting and autocomplete by providing smart completions based on variable types, function definitions, and imported modules, and better debugging. You can download Visual Studio Code from code.visualstudio.com. That's Visual Studio one word. So code.visualstudio.com, and then select the version that's best for your computer. Okay, I now have a VS Code up and running. Next, I'll open the folder with my Visual Basic script in it. This one here, 001 Macro Scheduler. Select folder so that we can use Visual Studio Code to edit our text. I'm going to select version 1.3. You can see there's some similarities between Visual Basic Script and VBA. For example, these lines in green are comments, just like in VBA. Let's go through what this script does. First, it specifies the full file path and name of the Excel workbook with the macro that we want to schedule. So I've got these in two variables. The first is Excel file path, and the second is Excel file name. Next, we specify the module and macro name within the Excel file. So this bit here is the module. There's a dot between the module and the macro name. And the second part here is the macro name. So our macro is inside the scheduler module, and it's called record_timestamp. Next, this whole bit here from line 11 to line 20 creates an instance of Excel if one isn't already open. So if you're not running Excel, this will actually go and open Excel with this line here. Let me now scroll up a bit. Okay. From line 22, we specify 2223. In this case, I want the Excel app to be visible because I want to be able to see that it's running. So I set this property to be true. You could set it to be false if you want to hide the Excel window. Line 2526, I'm going to prevent Excel app alerts because sometimes if you have an update external link alert or some other alert, it needs user attention. So this script would stay stuck at that stage if there was an alert. So I'm not going to display alerts. I'm going to set Excel app.display alerts to be false. Now this bit, this is going to check if the workbook with the macro is already open, because you may actually have Excel open, but the workbook itself isn't open. And so this basically goes through each WB, each workbook in the Excel app collection of workbooks and checks if the workbook name is the same as the Excel file name that we specified up before, up here, bit above the screen where you can see it. So if the workbook isn't open, we're going to use this logic to open it. This bit is the key part for our macro running. Excel app.run Excel macro path. So once we've got Excel open and we have the workbook open that we want, we're going to run the macro inside that workbook. Next, we're going to reset display alerts to be true before we close Excel, and then close Excel if we'd started a new instance of Excel. Last, we're going to leave an on-screen message just to confirm that the macro scheduler actually worked. It's going to be a message box that says, your automated task successfully ran at the time now, and put it inside a VB information user form. Let's test if the script works. I'm going to double-click Visual Basic Script in the File Manager. You'll see Excel opened, the macro ran, and we got our information box that says, your automated task successfully ran at 5:05:18 p.m. Now that's great, but what happens if we want to run the same script at a specific time or at regular intervals? That's where the Windows Task Scheduler comes in. So Windows Task Scheduler is a built-in tool that can run any program or script at a time you specify. I advise you run it as an administrator, give you full access and control of the tasks you create. So to do this, right-click and run as administrator. Now let's create a folder within the Task Scheduler library. We'll use it to keep our tasks separate. So right-click and select New Folder. I'm going to call it My Tasks. Now select My Tasks, and we're going to create our first task by clicking here, Create Task. Let's go through each of the tabs. In the General tab, let's give it a name and a description. For name, we can choose Schedule My Macro. And for the description, let's use a task that runs an Excel macro using a VBScript. Next, in the Triggers tab, let's click on New to create a new trigger. A trigger is a condition that tells a task when to run. You can choose from different options, either on a schedule, at logon, at startup. For us, we'll use daily, and then we'll change this to be 12:00:00 a.m. And we will want to repeat the task every 5 minutes. then do it for a duration of indefinitely. So we'll click on OK to create the new trigger. Next, in the Actions tab, we'll select a new action, which is to start a program or a script. We'll browse and we'll type in here VScript. So VBScript.exe runs the command line script host that runs our Visual Basic script. We also need to add the file path of our Visual Basic script into the arguments field. So to do that, I'm going to go into the file manager. I'm going to right click on the file and I'm going to select copy as path. I'm going to come back here and paste that inside the arguments field. Now I'll click OK. The next tab is conditions. So here we can set some additional conditions for the task. We're going to leave them as default. And in settings, we'll leave most of these as they are, except for this one here. So if the task is already running, then the following rule applies. We'll stop the existing instance. So this will close any dialog box that's left open from a previous task and allow the new instance to run. Now we're ready to create the task. We'll click on OK. So first, let's test it works. I'll click on Run. So it's told us automated task successfully ran at 6:28:53. Click OK. So we know it runs. The question now is, does it work on schedule? So I'm going to change this a little bit. I've found a little hack. If I go in and change the properties, I'll now go and click on Triggers. In the Triggers tab, click on the trigger we just set up, and we'll edit this. So normally we can only do this for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 hour intervals. I found this hack where you can actually change this to 1 minute. But for me, it only works after I've set it up for 5 minutes. But now it's going to set to repeat every 1 minute. I'll click on OK and click on OK again. And now we can refresh this. So the next time it runs should be very soon, 6:30. So we'll give it a few seconds. Now 6:30. So that actually didn't work as expected. I played around and found a bug in Task Scheduler. So it doesn't seem to work for me for the first task that I set up in the new folder. Maybe it's just the way I'm set up because I'm running a virtual Windows machine on a Mac, or maybe it's actually a bug in this version of the software. Anyway, to get this to work, I added an identical task, but called it Schedule 2. So here you can see that was the original, and this is my number 2 task. And so now it's running automated as expected every minute. So in theory, Windows Task Scheduler is very flexible and customizable because you can set triggers and actions, and you can create as many tasks as you want and run them at pretty much any time or condition you want. But as we've seen, it can also be buggy. So if you decide to use it, please test out your scripts before you rely on them working. And once you get it to work, it's pretty good because it can automate the running of your macros. Congratulations! You've just learned how to schedule your Excel macros to run automatically using 2 different methods. The first is VBA's Application.OnTime, and the second is Windows Task Scheduler. This is a powerful skill that can help you save time, automate tasks, and improve productivity. With VBA's Application.OnTime, you can easily set up your macro to run at any interval you want, down to a second. Remember, the downside is that you can't see what macros are scheduled or when they'll run. With Windows Task Scheduler, you can use a Visual Basic script to run your macro based on various triggers and conditions. The upside is you can see and manage your tasks in the user interface. The downside is you can't set triggers to repeat at intervals of less than a minute. And the Task Scheduler has been known to misbehave, as we saw just now. So always make sure to test your tasks do work as planned. So depending on your needs and preferences, you can choose the method that suits you best. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. I'd love to hear from you. How do you want to use scheduling in your workflow or projects? And do you have any questions about how this works? Let me know in the comments below.